And I think that for many people with money, depending on obviously the context that they grew up with and the money dynamics at home, some of us, when we start to pay attention to money, we go into that like dogmatic place about it, or those are the voices we hear about like kind of this like militant approach to how to do money right. There's this right way to do it. And maybe there's different camps about what's right. And so you spend all this time trying to figure out like, ooh, whose way is right? What's the right camp? Or you listen to these voices or you read these books or you follow this program. But I think my experience and work I've done with women over the years has been, it really at the end of the day comes down to a relationship that you have with money.
Hey, it's Nichole Kellerman-Worth, CEO of WildBeAlive.com, where we help women get on the same team as their bodies so they can feel and look their best. When a woman realizes how badass her body is, she feels alive and is no longer afraid to create the life she's always wanted. I know this to be true because it's happened to me and thousands of our clients. Welcome to the journey of getting on the same team as your body. Hello, sisters. Ooh, do I have a treat for you? My friend Kate is here, and we are going to dive much more deeply as the episodes have been going, right? We've been talking about money and mindset and your body and all of those things. We're going to continue that and bring Kate in and get her perspective on the whole shebang, because these two parts of ourselves collide. And I don't think we really realize it. And I think if you've been listening to the podcast in the last few episodes, you're starting to understand that more. So as usual, we would like to bring in an expert for the last podcast of the month and get her perspective. And Kate and I met last year. Well, yeah, I guess it was last year. Yeah. And, she's kind of dove into Wildly Alive and fished around in here and loves the message. And I thought she was a perfect person to come on because she helps women feel empowered around their relationship with money. And she knows the Wildly Alive message really well as well. So Kate, so excited to have you here.
Hi, I'm excited to be here with you. This is going to be so fun and just so meaty. Yeah,
it really is. And if I were to listen to Kate talk about some concept around money, we could just interchange the word money and body, and it sounds exactly the same as we've been talking about here on the podcast. And so, so I'm just going to open it up to you, Kate. Where do you feel like is a good place to start talking about this?
So I know a little bit of your story, Nichole, and this kind of popped into my head earlier when I was thinking about our chat. And that is not your journey with money necessarily, but your journey with how you evolved your own consciousness around your relationship with your body. And, you kind of came at it from one angle earlier in your life. And I know you were a trainer and, had this one particular approach. And then you've transformed into who you are and the work you do and Wildly Alive now. And I think that for many people with money, depending on obviously the context that they grew up with and the money dynamics at home, some of us, when we start to pay attention to money, we go into that like dogmatic place about it, or those are the voices we hear about like kind of this like militant approach to how to do money right. There's this right way to do it. And maybe there's different camps about what's right. And so you spend all this time trying to figure out like, whose way is right? What's the right camp? Or you listen to these voices or you read these books or you follow this program. But I think my experience and work I've done with women over the years has been, it really at the end of the day comes down to a relationship that you have with money. So if we swap these words, right, it's so similar. And so I think a lot of us are working, maybe we've made that journey with our bodies, but we're still in that other place with the money relationship.
Right. So, okay, this is interesting. So the whole idea of like Wildly Alive in the plant, right? The living, breathing, feeling thing, it, hears you and it's speaking to you and it's responding to your words. Like that's really, really powerful. If you think about that through the lens of money, like what if money was a person? What would she or he or they or whatever, like, what would they say? would they want to hang out with you? Like, are you saying kind and nice things about money? Like, what do you really think about that? See, that's why it's so powerful that you can just really interchange it. It's a relationship. It's not just like this physical thing that it just, like this is what I say about my body is like I used to think it was just this thing that hung on me that was never right and always wrong and just and I always talk crap about it. And that's, it's like think about that through the lens of like money. Interesting.
That to me is some of the most profound work. And it's really, many of us never even get the opportunity to come to be introduced to the concept of money as a relationship because, in a way that's sort of like a more feminine approach to money. And the money industry is very masculine energy for the most part, right? So whether you're talking about like budgeting and paying down debt and your credit score or whatever, or you're talking about like investing and stocks and, what, it's still usually about these external things and experts somewhere and playing that game. But when you take away all of that noise and you anchor in the relationship, like that is so empowering for us because ultimately what we know from work that you do with your body and yourself, like no one can tell you what you value in the world. And no one can tell you how you want to spend your time and how you want to create money in your life. And no one can tell you what you want to invest in or not be associated with, or, where you want to live in the world. Like these are all values. And, I think beginning our understanding of money as a relationship leads us to a values conversation, which leads then to the choices you make and the tools you use and the people you listen to. So it's like, what's the relationship? What's your values? And you take it from there. And I love what you said about, if money was a person, because I think a really great exercise for this, and maybe you have folks do it, I don't know, is like, write a letter to yourself as if you were money, right? Like
write a letter to money.
Right. Or write a letter, like money's writing you a letter, or you're writing money a letter. You could do it either way. But like basically there's a letter about the relationship between you and money. And I did this a few years ago. I think Jen Sincero has this in her book.
Yes, she does. Right? Yes.
So
you're a badass at making money.
You're a badass at making money. That's one of the exercises in there. And I've seen other places too. And it's so great because what it illuminates for a lot of us is that we have like a really push and pull relationship. Like it's not even one thing. It makes no sense when you map it out. It's like, you want me, but you don't want me. You mad at me that I don't come, but then you don't like make space for me, or all the ways that this can show up. So even like beginning with that relationship by going through a process of writing this letter. Well, if I were to write a letter about my relationship with money up until today, what is it?
Right. Yeah, we actually do an exercise like that in The Weight of Money. And it's always so telling. Well, I mean, a lot of people are really angry at money, which again, like is valid if they feel like it's always feast or famine, it's there and then it's not, and it's not really, and that's important in the process of healing any sort of relationship. If it's a relationship with money or yourself or your body or your partner, if you have anger and frustration to work through, you've got to work through that first to then get into a healthier place with it. And I feel like when women are first introduced to this exercise, they're really, disappointed and angry that money is just not there for them like they'd like it to be.
Or even like feel disempowered by money, right? That it's this, but I think you talk about this with women in the body too, which is like, there's being mad at feeling like I need to have this perfect shape. And there's being mad at patriarchy, right? There's being mad at a system that we're all swimming inside, which is making women feel that our purpose is to be kind of subservient and adornments, right? Like, so there's being mad at money, and there's being mad at the system that might make it so that, it's hard to make enough money where you live or with the experiences you have and pay your bills, right? Like, so the anger when you piece it apart, yes, it could be money, but it could be something bigger because money is just a neutral tool
Right.
inside the
Yeah.
life we're living.
For me, for so long, money was a source of control. For sure. That is what it was for me. So I never felt like money was never there for me per se, because as long as I worked hard, as long as I hustled, as long as I was constantly in motion, then I always, like all growing up, I started working really young when I was like 14 years old. I had multiple jobs. And so I learned very early on is like money will be there as long as you hustle and grind and, work hard. And yes, I mean, there's a level of truth to that for sure, but it got to a place of like total control where I would never relax, right? Like workaholism for sure. Like any sort of like, I have a very addictive personality in general with my body, with food, with exercise, with money, with control of the money. And so I always had this feeling that money was always going to be there, but underneath that was because I will hustle and grind and I will force and make it happen. Like that was definitely how it was, and that got me really far in life. Don't get me wrong, like I saved up $3,000 by the time I was 16 and bought my own car, and like I was really proud of myself, but as you start developing a life and you start meeting people, and I met Zach, what happened was I was just working so much. I didn't even take a single day off ever. And I remember him asking me, like, could you like maybe take Sundays off, like could you not work on Sundays? And I chose to honor that because I really liked him. And I remember feeling so uncomfortable in not working. Like, oh, well, then I at least will be doing the dishes and doing the laundry and cleaning that and do. And he was like very opposite of me. He was very chill. And he was like, can we just like hang out in bed and like drink some coffee? And I was like, well, I'm usually like drinking coffee and like doing something, like usually. And so it kind of fed into this very weird dynamic with money, is like, I can actually only trust you as long as I am working hard.
Right. It's this myth of like, my value is in my productivity. If I'm not being productive, which could mean work, it could also just be like on Saturday, and maybe you just want to like chill with the family, but instead you're like, well, I've got it, but I really need to do all these things. And it's like, maybe there's a compromise in there, right? So like this concept, and I mean, I feel like we all have to continually be mindful of that because it's really seductive. It's just really hard, and I'm reminded of my growing up, which I can share with you, just this intersection of money and food. So my mom constantly, like every day, would write her calorie count on scraps of paper. Never, like the weight never like went anywhere, right? But it was just this constant like control process. I'm sure you know more about this. But she would do similar things with money, right? And another place where there was, so she always, two things. Whenever she fills the car up with gas, she checks the mileage.
Oh, the mileage.
Every single time for her entire life that she checks gas, she will calculate the mileage. It could be last week, this week. There's no change, but there's something about like, is this the right price? Is this efficient?
Oh.
And the second thing is on groceries, she would always write down how much she spent on groceries and like keep it. So this tracking of calories, tracking of expenses, tracking of efficiency, all that underlies those is scarcity. Well, it's control and scarcity, right? And so when you're on top of it, it feels great.
Yeah,
right?
I'm doing it. I'm so great. I'm so awesome. I'm in my calorie count. I'm in my budget range. Yes,
But like, what is your relationship inside that counting, right? Because it's not that the counting is good or bad. It's like, and I've seen folks kind of swing on this pendulum of like, I'm not going to look.
Right.
I'm not going to look at the scale.
Right.
I'm not going to look at the calories or whatever irrelevant, but I'm not going to look at the scale, or I'm going
The
to
bank
not look at my money.
statements, the
I'm
credit
not
card
looking.
statements. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And it's very similar, this resistance, because the looking has had this other meaning of like control and scarcity. And so it's like, I think the best way through that pendulum, it's not that to look or to not look is wrong and evil. It's like stepping into the relationship you're having with either one of those, where you find yourself like, what would, and this is sort of really the goal of looking at the relationship with money, is like, what would it mean for me to build my financial intimacy? Like more intimacy between me and money, right? Like, is there something blocking that? Is it I'm resistant to it? Is it, well, there's another person in the relationship, right? There's my partner, and, they are the ones who are in charge of money. And I just, have to accept the circumstance, or, right, is there a third party? So that, like, the intimacy with the relationship with money, I think, is a way forward to break out of that control, scarcity, fear space. But I would love to hear what you think from your knowledge of those behaviors that show up elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that I was just thinking too is like, I'm sitting here saying, like, I always trusted that money was going to be there because I was in control of it. This is like the willpower masculine, right? And the same thing with my body. It's the same thing. I lost weight through dieting. I was like one of the 5% of people who could lose weight through dieting. And, and I used to think that this was like such an attribute, and it really wasn't at all. I was just able to hate myself enough, or be scared enough or fearful enough to let that fear drive me into a very unhealthy place, because again, I lost the weight, and people can argue, oh, you were healthier. No, I wasn't healthier, right? I was much worse off. And so I'm sitting here saying, I never took a day off, and I just hustled. And it was the same thing with my body, just be in the calorie count, make sure you don't eat bread or butter or red meat, and make sure you're exercising, and no fun, no wine, none of that. And so it was just this crazy grip of control. And so when I think about intimacy, and I always have to come back, because I'm still growing in my relationship with money. And I mean, I'm not to say I'm like totally there 100% with my body all the time, but because I talk about my relationship with my body and women's relationship with their body, I'm obviously a little further ahead. But I think about, okay, what's a concept that Wildly Alive teaches that helps you become more intimate with your body and create that safety? And how can you translate that to your relationship with money? Because intimacy, I mean, that's like a complex word there around your relationship with money.
Well, in the context of money, it can begin with just awareness of how you're showing up in the relationship. It's just, that's like level one in this, like, oh, I don't even know, right? Like, well, that's one way of, like, you're just, emotionally cut off from the relationship. And the next might be, looking at whether you want to look at something to do with your money, a certain statement. And it might be, well, like, why don't I want to look at this? And it could be, I fear there's not enough. Or it could be, I don't understand it and I feel dumb. Or it could be, this situation that the statement shows me brings up a whole story of why this situation happened, and I don't want to move through that story, right? So there could be like a variety of things that are playing out, and it's just slowing it down enough with the thing in front of you. And we kind of start typically with folks being like, is there something in your relationship with money that you want to heal, right? And oftentimes something always comes forward for all of us, and it changes depending on where we are in life. And then it's like believing that you can change, right? Your beliefs or your habits, knowing that there in some area of your life you've been able to do that and drawing strength from that and then kind of moving forward. And, I will tell you that your story there just brought something up for me, which is for many years I was a financial advisor, and for many years we were a family, back at home trying to just build a life together. And I remember sitting early days in this meeting with a client, and I was very new, so I was sort of like junior to the more senior advisor who knew the client a long time. And the client was this man in his 60s. He was retired, and I had negative money, right? Like, I'm at the table advising people on their investments, but I actually have negative money because
Right.
I'm dealing with a cash flow situation. Like, I
Right.
can't think about investing. I'm literally trying to pay student debts and make it work every month, right? So it's my reality, but my job is a different thing, right? So, and I'm sitting there, and this man has $20 million, right? He has $20 million. And I, had to work through my own feelings over time about what does it mean when I hear $20 million, like what happens in my body, right? And I can tell you that that is also a journey. There are people who come into life with different levels of wealth and learn different messages and pick up along the way about what money means or doesn't mean. So without going down those tangents for a second, this guy had $20 million. I have negative money. And he's sitting there saying he's terrified he's going to have to end up eating cat food.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And I looked at him and I remember having this sort of out of body moment, and I thought, I'm scared and he's scared. So it's not about the numbers. Right?
Right. Right.
It's not about the numbers. So there's this, what's undergirding him in that moment, right, was more about a scarcity mindset. And it was illuminating to realize, the numbers can change, but if you don't get to what's underneath, it doesn't matter, right? It's the same with, like, I would imagine how one may have got to losing weight in a very tight, like white knuckled way versus coming to peace with who they are in their body and moving into kind of a healthful way of being.
Oh my gosh, that's so crazy. Because there are women who jump into Wildly Alive who had lost the weight in some way, shape, or form, right? If it's plastic surgery, if it's lap band, if it's crazy exercising, if it's boot camps, restrictive, whatever. But dun, 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 exactly what we're talking about here. The same exact fear is still living throughout their body of not being good enough, not being thin enough, not being healthy enough, so on and so forth. So it's like, it's really not about the money. It's not about the weight. It's about how you feel about the weight. It's how you feel about the money. God, that's so true. And we've heard it. I mean, I've heard that, like, women have come in and who, again, have negative money and have this fear, and then make some money and still have this fear because they haven't worked at the root of it. So there was a question that you asked there. So I like to offer like an awakening activity with every podcast, something for, the sisters to really take away and really marinate on and think about, or maybe take some action around. And there was a question that you said in there that I thought was perfect. It was something about, like, what's the first step? What do you remember?
Was it about the feeling?
Yeah, well, what was that?
Oh, about hearing the number $20 million?
No, it was before the story. You said like something about, like, what was the first step to, like, healing your intimacy with money? I mean, I should have wrote it down. But can you think of like a really good first step?
Well, we love that. They've already done the letter idea, right? But the first step was, I think I know what we're talking about, which is, like, what is one thing you'd like to change with your reality with money or your relationship with money? You could kind of do whatever brings it up easier for you, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, and then believe, like, do you have evidence in your life that you are able to make change to a behavior or to a habit or to a belief? And or it could be a feeling, right? So what is the thing that's coming up that you would most want to change. Like maybe it could be like, I want to feel like we're good stewards of the money we have, right? That can be something that no matter what your money situation is brings peace to get to that place.
Yeah, I would say for me, and this is something I've been working on for years, ever since I wrote that letter to money, which is a really good awakening activity too, as well, is I want to be able to trust that money will be there, even if I'm not hustling or working or forcing or controlling or all the things. Like, again, you come back to the body. You want to trust that your body will be there for you and your health will be there for you, even without the calorie counting and the control and the, manipulation with the food and the good food and the bad food and things like that. So I love that. I love that question being the opening to the work, really, because that's going to give you a really good, first step.
Yeah. And I wonder what the parallel here is too, because what's coming up for me right now is the concept of circulating money. Because for many of us, it might be easier to be on one side or the other of that circular flow, right? So it might be hard to give. It might be hard to receive.
Right.
And which one of those feels harder? That could also be a thing to test, right? So for example, I always use the example of like the coffee shop. I'd always get my coffee and never tip. And then I was like, why don't I do this? And then I had all sorts of fascinating stories in my brain about all sorts of things. And then I was like, I think I want to begin to test what it feels like to do this differently and see what comes up. And that was a really fun and really transformative exercise of noticing that in the circulation, I was stuck here. And what would happen if I started to intentionally just go a little further?
Is that video on your Instagram? Because I remember when you shared that video I think you uploaded it to Instagram.
I think it is on Instagram.
Okay, good. Okay,
yes.
Because that's where we're going next, is like, how can you connect with Kate? And so she shares, I remember listening to this story about tipping. And you really have to pay attention to like what she's saying, because I was like, I remember just sitting there, like, just in awe of like, oh my gosh, like she's so right. Like this whole idea of tipping, because I mean, tipping in general, there's weird stuff around it. People from other countries outside of the US think it's like the weirdest thing on the planet. And, like our own stigmas with it. And so, so we will put Kate's Instagram in the description somewhere around this video or this audio. You'll find it. And I would go to, it's a longer video, so it's going to be on her like IGTV.
Yeah, I don't have too many videos, so it should be pretty easy to find.
Yeah.
And I think that's great, because going back all the way back to the thing about the relationship and discovering your own values, is I had these values intellectually, but I wasn't living them, right? So I had this value of being a generous person, or generosity, or giving to others. I worked in nonprofits for years, and like I was being the opposite of that in this very micro place that I could begin to play with and change.
Yep. So powerful. Okay, this is so good. You have some good stuff to work on from this podcast. So if you want to connect with Kate, definitely check out her Instagram. Do you want to just share the handle? What's the handle?
Yeah, it's at I am Kate Barron, and Barron is Barron.
Okay, perfect. So if you're just listening to the audio, you can just search that in Instagram. And yeah, is there any last piece that you want to share? Any last little bits?
I believe that women, in two massive areas of our life, the work that you do with money and the work that you do with your body, could change the planet.
Amen. I totally agree with that. Gosh, that's so good. And the fact is that if you really do start looking at one of those two areas, and you think about both of the areas while you're working on one, you could synergistically work on both.
You could unlock it. I do think it's I mean, it's fun to have this conversation with you because sometimes I compartmentalize my brain and I'm like,
Right.
oh, on
That's
the
what
money
I'm
side, I
saying
do this. On
too.
the food side, I do that.
That's exactly what I'm thinking too, is like, wow, you could be working on both simultaneously if you just bring a little bit of awareness to like, oh, you're sharing this concept with a client right now. Maybe you should just look in the mirror for a minute and think, how can I take this concept and apply it to my relationship with money? And I think I would probably be like, oh,
Talk about compound effects. Yes.
right, right. Oh, so good. Thank you so much for coming on, Kate. This
Thanks,
was really
Nichole. This was
awesome.
fun. We should do this again. It was so great.
Yes, absolutely. So I hope that you ladies enjoyed this. Of course, share if it's resonating with you. Check out Kate. She is obviously, her messaging is so good and so grounded, and she just has this very calming effect, I feel, on me. So I'm sure she has that on you as well. And like these really unique perspectives, like just that video about tipping. I was just kind of like, I'm usually like kind of ADD on Instagram. And I remember just watching it and being like in awe of like, whoa, okay. So she's a really great person to follow if you wanna feel more empowered around money, for sure. So, all right. Thanks so much, Kate.
Bye, Nichole.
All right. As usual, when in doubt, ask your body. Bye.